My brother-in-law, Adewale, a man the whole of Ibadan seemed to respect, was standing in my living room, a place he had always entered with an air of authority and charm. Now, that authority was gone, replaced by a desperate, pleading energy that felt alien in our home. His expensive Igbada, usually so crisp and a symbol of his status, was a rumpled mess, mirroring the chaotic ruin he had made of his life and my sister's heart. He was begging my sister for forgiveness, his voice cracking with sorrow that rang completely hollow, a performance for an audience that no longer believed him. It was far too late for apologies. His words were just empty air, puffs of sound in a room thick with the stench of his deceit. We had just uncovered the full, devastating truth behind a lavish trip he took, a vacation that was not for business but for pleasure, funded by the ultimate act of betrayal. This was a trip he had taken with his mistress, a secret indulgence paid for with my sister's future, her security, and her connection to our ancestors. He had stolen my sister's ancestral land, the very heart of her inheritance, and sold it for what amounted to a cheap thrill and a few weeks of stolen pleasure. The piece of earth our father had left her, a promise of her independence, was gone. Adewale had meticulously planned its theft, believing his respected position in the community would shield him from any suspicion, that his actions would remain a dirty secret hidden away from the world. He genuinely thought no one would ever know. He believed the quiet, respectable streets of Bodija, where the elite of the city resided, would keep his secrets buried forever beneath their smooth tarmac and behind their high walls. He was arrogant in his deception, confident that his reputation was an impenetrable fortress. He had built a life on the appearance of honor, never imagining that the foundations were made of sand. He was wrong. In a city like Ibadan, which beats like a living heart, secrets are not easily kept. Truth has a way of seeping through the cracks, carried on whispers from neighbor to neighbor, from the market stalls to the elders' gatherings. The truth always finds its way out into the light, and the consequences of his actions, born from greed and arrogance, would not just be a fleeting embarrassment. They would become a shadow that would haunt him for the rest of his miserable life. To truly grasp the profound depth of this betrayal, you must first understand the beautiful, carefully woven life that he so carelessly tore apart. My sister, Folake, was the pride of our family, a woman who embodied a rare combination of grace and inner strength. She moved through the world with a quiet confidence that was captivating. When she walked to the bustling Oyai market, her gilly stood tall and proud, a vibrant, expertly tied crown that announced her presence with elegance. The coral beads on her wrists, a precious gift passed down from our grandmother, were more than just jewelry. They were a part of her. They jingled with a special music as she moved, a sound that was uniquely Folake, a melody of her heritage and her spirit. She was a woman deeply connected to her roots, and it showed in every aspect of her being, from her dignified posture to the warm, genuine smile she offered everyone she met. When she married Adewale, the entire community agreed it was a perfect match, a union blessed by the ancestors themselves. He was a man of substance, or so we all believed, a figure of great respect and influence. He lived in Bodija, a neighborhood where the roads were smooth and the houses stood tall with an air of importance, a testament to the success of their owners. Adewale was a pillar of this community, his confident baritone voice a familiar sound at meetings where he always seemed to have the wisest counsel. He was a picture of modern Yoruba success, always dressed in the finest attire, its deep indigo patterns speaking of a profound connection to tradition and wealth. His charm was undeniable, his attentiveness to my sister unwavering. In the early years, he treated Folake like a queen, showering her with affection and respect, making their life together appear as a perfect picture of marital bliss, a true blessing that we all celebrated. After our father passed on, he left Folake a piece of our family's history, a tangible link to our past, a plot of land and a humble but sturdy house near the old cocoa market. It was not a palace, but in its own way it was priceless. It represented her security, her connection to our lineage, and a rare symbol of financial independence for a woman in our family. She kept the deed and the old iron keys in a small, worn leather pouch, which she tied securely at her waist, always hidden beneath the colorful folds of her iro and buba. That land was a silent promise from our father, a guarantee that she would always have a place to stand, a piece of this earth that was hers and hers alone. The trouble did not arrive like a thunderstorm. It started quietly, almost imperceptibly. It was like the slow, creeping harmattan dust that settles on every surface, changing the very air you breathe before you even realize what is happening. Adewale, armed with that easy smile and his arsenal of confident, persuasive words, began to take particular interest in the land. "My love," he would say to Folake in the evenings as they relaxed, his voice as smooth and intoxicating as fresh palm wine. "That land has so much potential. You are sitting on a treasure, and I, as your husband, can help you make the most of it." He spun magnificent tales of ambitious developers who were eager to invest in the area, of rising property values that could secure their future, of turning that ancestral soil into a fountain of wealth for their children. He was a masterful storyteller, painting vivid pictures of a life of even greater ease and luxury, all while framing it as their shared project, a team effort that would benefit them both. He made his greed sound like a noble ambition for their family. And Folake, who loved and trusted him with the entirety of her heart, listened intently to his every word. Why would she not? This was her husband, the man who had vowed to protect her, her shield and her guide in a world that is not always kind to women. She saw his interest not as a threat, but as an extension of his love and care for her and their future. His betrayal was unthinkable because the trust she had placed in him was absolute. He started bringing home thick stacks of documents, their pages filled with complex legal jargon that she did not fully understand. He would sit with her for hours, patiently explaining the clauses in a way that served his own hidden agenda. "This is just to give me the authority to speak to potential buyers on your behalf, my love," he'd say, pointing to a specific line. "And this part just allows me to manage the accounts. It is simply more efficient this way." His deception was so clever, so cloaked in the language of assistance, that she believed she was signing papers to merely explore options, not signing her entire life away. I remember seeing a fleeting flicker of doubt in my sister's eyes during that time. I noticed she held that leather pouch at her waist a little tighter, a subconscious gesture of protection. But Adewale's reputation was his greatest weapon. He was a man the entire community looked up to. His word was considered his bond. To question him, even in her own mind, felt like a betrayal in itself. So, with a heavy heart and a hand that trembled just a little, Folake signed. She untied the leather pouch from her waist and handed him the keys to her past and her future. She handed him the very weapon he would soon use to destroy her. Immediately after Folake signed those papers, the change in Adewale was not subtle. It was obvious and alarming. The man who once shared every small detail of his day, who had prided himself on his open communication with his wife, became a stranger in his own house. A wall of secrecy went up, and Folake found herself on the outside, confused and increasingly anxious. His phone became an extension of his hand, and he would frequently step out into the garden for hushed, urgent conversations, always with his back turned to the window. The easy, warm laughter that used to fill their home was gone, replaced by a tense, heavy silence that felt suffocating. The air was thick with unspoken words and a growing sense of dread. Then he announced an urgent business trip to Lagos. A big deal, he claimed, was about to close, one that would set them up for life. Folake, ever the dutiful wife, packed his bag for him, ironing his shirts with the same care she always did, but a cold knot of fear was tightening in her stomach. His story felt thin, his excitement forced. A few days after he left, I went to visit her. The house felt unnervingly still. I found her by the window in the living room, just staring out at nothing, her wrapper loose and her eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked like a ghost of the vibrant, strong woman she used to be, her spirit seemingly drained from her body. She told me she couldn't reach him. His phone was switched off. The business partners he had mentioned by name, she had gathered the courage to call them, only for them to tell her they'd never heard of the deal he described. The final, crushing blow came from a neighbor, a kind woman who had been at the airport the very day Adewale was supposed to have left for Lagos. She had seen him, but he was not alone. He was with a young woman from his office, a junior employee named Ngozi. The neighbor, not realizing the gravity of what she was witnessing, described her perfectly. A tight, shiny yellow lace dress, impossibly high heels, and her hair braided with shimmering gold beads. And they were not heading to the domestic terminal for Lagos. They were in the international queue, laughing and holding hands, looking like a couple heading for a romantic getaway. Panic, cold and sharp, took over. With me by her side for support, Folake went straight to the land registry office. The clerk, a kind, elderly man who knew our father, did not need to say much. He just looked at us with deep pity in his eyes. The land had been sold 3 weeks ago. The house near the cocoa market, her connection to our father, her security, was gone. A frantic trip to the bank confirmed our absolute worst nightmare. He had cleaned out every single account, including the one holding the massive cash deposit from the land sale. He had not just stolen her inheritance. He had erased her financial identity, all to fund a lavish vacation with his mistress. In a city like Ibadan, secrets do not last long. The city thrives on connection and community, and information flows through it like a current. The news of Adewale's profound betrayal spread not like a sudden wildfire, but with the steady, resonant beat of a talking drum, a rhythm of disgrace that echoed from the wealthy avenues of Bodija to the most crowded and bustling markets. Every beat told the story of his theft, his adultery, and his unforgivable deception. This was never going to be just a private, domestic matter. In Yoruba culture, a man's actions, his honor or his lack thereof, are not his alone. They reflect on his entire family, his lineage, and his community. Adewale had not just shamed Folake. He had dragged his own father's respected name to the thickest mud, tarnishing a legacy that had been built over generations of integrity and hard work. He had disgraced his ancestors and dishonored his name. The community elders, men of great standing and wisdom, swiftly called meeting. They gathered under the ancient, sprawling mango tree in the center of the community, a place where judgments had been passed down for centuries. Their faces were carved with the seriousness of the situation. Of course, we knew we could have taken him to a formal court of law, but that would be a long, expensive, and ugly fight, exposing our family's wounds to a cold, impersonal system. In our world, the community's judgment is faster, more intimate, and in many ways, far more powerful. Our mother was there, a pillar of quiet dignity in her grief. She wore her oldest, most faded aso oak, a deliberate and public symbol of our family's sorrow and shame. The market women came too, dozens of them, leaving their stalls to sit with us. They did not come to gossip or stare. They came to sit with us in a quiet, powerful show of solidarity, their presence a fortress of support around my sister and our mother. The verdict of the elders was never spoken aloud in a formal declaration, but it was absolute and understood by everyone present. Adewale had committed an unforgivable offense. His actions of theft and adultery were not just seen as personal betrayals against his wife. They were viewed as acts that tore at the moral fabric of the entire community. He had broken a sacred trust, and for that, there was no forgiveness. When he finally returned from his trip, tanned and smiling, he stepped not into his home, but into a nightmare of his own making. The world he knew was gone. Adewale's ruin was not a sudden, dramatic explosion. It was a slow, suffocating collapse, a social death that was agonizing to watch yet universally agreed upon as just. He would walk through his own neighborhood, the same streets where he was once hailed as a leader, and friends who once shouted his name in greeting now looked straight through him, their eyes cold and empty. Their silence was a verdict in itself, a clear and public statement of his new status. At the mosque, a place where community and brotherhood are paramount, the men would physically shift away from him as he approached, leaving an empty space around him, a quarantine of shame. This silent, collective shunning was more powerful than any angry words. His business partners, men who had once clamored to be associated with him, swiftly and unceremoniously tore up their contracts. Who, after all, would want to be in business with a man who so brazenly stole from his own wife? His reputation, once his greatest and most valuable asset, was now utterly worthless. He lost his prestigious job. He was unceremoniously removed from the community boards and committees where his voice once held so much weight. In a matter of weeks, he became a complete outcast, a man without a social standing, without allies, and without a place to belong. Even Ngozi, the young woman for whom he had risked everything, saw which way the wind was blowing. She had been attracted to his power, his status, and his money. Once the money began to dwindle and his social standing was completely destroyed, she vanished without a trace, leaving him utterly alone in the wreckage he had created. She was a parasite who had her fill and moved on, offering him no comfort or loyalty. He became a shadow of his former self, a walking cautionary tale whispered by parents to their children as a lesson in honor and integrity. People would point him out on the street. That's the man who sold his honor for a vacation. In a city like Ibadan, where respect is a true currency of life, Adewale was bankrupt. He might have had some cash left from the sale, but he had absolutely nothing of value. That was his curse. To be a wealthy man who was poorer than any beggar on the street, because he had lost his name. While Adewale's world faded into a lonely, gray existence, my sister Folake began the slow, arduous, and painful journey of rebuilding her life from the ashes of his betrayal. At first, she was completely broken. The shock and the grief were a physical weight that pressed down on her, stealing her light and her energy. She would sit in the courtyard for hours, her spirit as barren and cracked as the dusty ground beneath her feet, staring into space, lost in her pain. But the same community that cast Adewale out wrapped its collective arms around Folake, determined to not let her fall. The women, in particular, were her saviors. They formed a silent, resilient army of support around her. They brought her food when she had no appetite, ensuring she did not waste away in her sorrow. They sat with her in silence when she could not find the words to speak, their comforting presence a balm on her wounded soul. They poured their own strength into her, one bowl of hot soup, one shared story at a time. They told her tales of other women in their families, their mothers and grandmothers, who had survived worse, who had risen from ashes to build new lives. They reminded her of the strength that was already inside her, the strength of her lineage. Slowly, painstakingly, their efforts began to break through her despair. One morning, something shifted. She stood up, tied her wrapper tight around her waist in a gesture of renewed resolve, held her head high, and went to the market. She started small, with a single tray, frying and selling akara. Her hands, which were once soft and decorated with intricate henna designs, grew calloused and strong, moving with a new, fierce purpose. Every naira she earned was a small victory, a testament to her own will to survive. Slowly, she saved every single coin. The other market women made it a point to buy from her every day. Their daily purchases a consistent vote of confidence, a small investment in her recovery. In time, she saved enough to rent a small stall of her own. The day she stood on a stool and painted her own name above that stall was a day of immense triumph for all of us. And her laughter, which we thought was stolen from her forever, started to come back. It was quiet at first, a fragile sound, but then it grew, as full and life-giving as the first rains after a long, hard, dry season. In the end, the ancestral land was gone forever. The money from its sale had been squandered on fleeting pleasures by a man who now had nothing. But my sister, Folake, found a different kind of inheritance, one that could never be stolen or sold. She discovered a wealth that was forged in the fires of her deepest pain, a value that resided not in property or bank accounts, but within her own spirit. She learned that true wealth is not something you can own or possess. It is something you become. It is the courage to get back up after you've been crushed into ground by betrayal. It is a respect you earn not through a family name or a husband status, but with your own two hands, through hard work and integrity. It is the unbreakable bond of community and the incredible, uplifting strength of women standing together. Today, Folake wears her geli with more pride and elegance than ever before. It is no longer just a symbol of tradition. It is a crown she has earned for herself, a testament to her own resilience and victory. Adewale is just a ghost in a city that has forgotten him, a living warning that echoes in the streets. When you lose your honor, you lose everything that truly matters. This is my sister's story. It is a story of a devastating betrayal, yes, but it is really a story of resilience, of the unyielding power of the human spirit to heal and to rebuild. It is a reminder that even when everything is taken from you, your own strength can be the foundation for a new life. What do you think you would have done in Folake's position? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if the story of strength and survival moved you, Please give this video a like and subscribe for more true stories that showcase the power of the human spirit. Thank you for listening.